Okay, seems to be working, I hope. Okay, here's another, my next report. This is on, well, some of it's updated stuff. Okay, I was watching, there's a show that comes on Sunday night on Fox called The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton, I think's his name, if I remember it right. And it's kind of the same thing as Bernie Sanders. I mean, corruption, only he's a little more favors Trump. He's less partial to Trump is the main thing. He sees Trump as a swamp drainer. The way Sanders, he sees where there's overlap between Trump and Sanders and brings it out. Anyway, tonight he had Newt Gingrich on. Newt Gingrich did not know crap. I wouldn't have called him on it, but, he was just not rolling with both. Usually I listen to Newt Gingrich and he sounds pretty good. Once in a while, he sounds like a pretty good swamp drainer. He knows where the corruption is, how to stop it. Tonight, he didn't seem to know anything. I don't know what's going on with that, but I'm hoping this report is better than what Newt Gingrich put out. Anyway, okay. First of all, the Ajit Pai problem with the FCC, the revolving door. Ajit Pai, FCC chairman, put in Verizon, to represent Verizon to the detriment of the public. Get in there, the FCC, do everything for Verizon, screw everybody else. 87% are opposed to net neutrality, opposed or support net neutrality. He's in there to knock it off, get a big check from Verizon to the detriment of everyone else in the country, basically, other than the Verizon Corporation. In other words, he's a very willful, fraudulent, low-down, what they say, like I say, the skilled labor types would call him, a low-down son of a bitch. Well, that's basically, they're pretty much right. Okay. This is my case. If you're in court, remember on the People's Court, they had some guy that had a balloon on Judge Wapner a long time ago. Boom, 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 the People's Court. The one with Judge Wapner a long time ago, they had a guy with a balloon. And he had a case, he was trying to defend himself. The balloon it was an advertising balloon, helium balloon, you see it all over the LA. And it had gotten released, and they lost it, and they were suing him. They said his equipment didn't work. And he came back and argued that, it was vandals. And he made the case, he climbed up the building to prove his case. And somebody wanted to know, what did that have to do with the case? Well, it has to do with a domino thing. I don't know how you say it, but this leads to this, it leads to this. You have to prove several things in order to prove by preponderance of the evidence that it was vandals. And anyway, this is what I'm trying to do with this Ajit Pai thing, where you have a link, a bunch of links. Anyway, Ajit Pai, FCC chairman. First of all, he was chosen by Mitch McConnell. I'm trying to prove by preponderance of the evidence that the purpose of Ajit Pai is to shut up and censor YouTube and anything that has to do what the independents talk about, like campaign finance reform, stopping the revolving door, stopping government corruption, the revolving door, gerrymandering, anything where the corporate America's stronghold over the government, where they have all the votes. They have their one man 50 votes, while the public has one man no vote. Anyway, and the voice, the independent voice, is he trying to shut him up. That's the purpose of Ajit Pai. That's why he's in there, to shut up the internet, basically. And this is my case for that, why people should be concerned that that's what he's doing. First of all, he was put in by Mitch McConnell, who's the kingpin of campaign finance corruption. Like I say, he's your ground zero. He's the troublemaker. He's the worst one you need to get rid of in Congress. Al Capone, that's what I think of. Al Capone. He's the Al Capone. What seizes up Congress, it keeps legislation from getting passed, all the campaign money coming in. That's why they can't get anything done with polarization. Okay, and it's the revolving door is involved. The revolving door is involved. In other words, The corporate lawyer, Ajappai is a corporate lawyer who worked for Verizon. He has a strong bias. He represents Verizon to the detriment of everyone else. Works for the okay, he comes in, he cleans house, and he gets back with Verizon, gets a raise. You know, for the big Buttafuoco job he did on the public. Okay, the three major networks reported that the reason for the corporate takeover was the silent, independent voices. And this was signed into law by damnable W. Bush. The three major networks reported that the reason the corporate media bought out, by the corporations bought out the networks was the silent, independent voices. Okay, the independent voices are let's see. The voices are, let's see, the stop the revolving door. Oh, the purpose of the independent voice is basically what they talk about, what I said earlier. They stop the revolving door, they stop the gerrymandering campaign, and they want campaign finance reform, and they talk about it. And those are people like Ross Perot, Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein, Michael Moore, a long time ago Jerry Brown, Jesse Ventura, and Trump to a degree. But basically, those are your independent voices trying to stop corruption. They're the one they're trying to shut up. Okay, the internet is put in by Al Gore to counteract the corporate media. Al Gore even stated that to amplify independent voices. That's why he put it in. The bill, O'Reilly stated the two Mexicans came across the border and raped a woman, and came across the border illegally. They raped a woman and went back to Mexico, got away with it. He also pointed out, it was a major story, that all the rest of the corporate-owned media refused to report this rape. Therefore, apparently there's a pact involved. In other words, there's an effort to censor things, to filter things out, and if they want open borders, and they profit from open borders, that drives wages down, and they get cheap labor, they pad their wallet to the detriment of the working class. Trump's trying to counteract that. So they have a reason to, be involved in a pact and shut it up that they're illegal alien rape somebody. Okay, then we know that Bernie Sanders said that the Disney profits from open borders, and they are part of the pact, and so is Comcast, Viacom, and Time Warner. They are part of the corporate media. Now, a congressman stated that the purpose of this bill that Bush signed that gave the power of the corporations to take over the media was to silent independent voices. It's reasonable to assume that Comcast acquired NBC and NSNBC for this very reason. It seems reasonable it would follow. Therefore, that's why they acquired Comcast. The purpose, and now there is a corporate interest in keeping the border open, just said that. We know Verizon has the same corporate interest as Comcast. I mean, who's not going to argue that? They have the same corporate interest. And if Comcast is part of a pact, wouldn't Verizon be part of that pact too? And if they have the same corporate interest in that same pact, and we know that YouTube and Fox are in conflict with these corporate interests, which means, which is evidence that if they're shutting up independent voices, probably Verizon's going to do the same thing, and we know that YouTube is in conflict with their corporate interests quite often. And that means if they're talking about campaign finance reform, they talk about the revolving door, and I know Cenk talks about it. Anyway, Cenk brought out that you don't drive through Kearney, Nebraska, Wichita, Kansas, see a bunch of Tesla sales. And Cenk said the reason why is because the lobbyists come in from out of state and keep Tesla out of all these states. So you don't see Tesla dealerships. That's what Cenk said. We also know that W. Bush put two corporate lawyers, Alito and Chief Justice Roberts, in the Supreme Court. They're both corporate lawyers to protect campaign finance, to stop campaign finance reform and knock out the McCain-Feingold law. That's the first thing he did. Citizens United case, he knocked it off because he had an oil company, and the electric cars are a threat to oil companies. So he knows that if they keep the Tesla out of Kansas and everywhere else, that protects Bush's oil business, and that's why he put those two corporate lawyers, Alito, Chief Justice Roberts, and Samuel Alito, who are both corporate lawyers. That's why they're in there. That's why Bush put them in there, to protect his oil business. And we know that they do keep electric cars out. So what does that do? That screws everybody. It screws the Tesla Corporation. It screws everybody who wants to buy them. And it slows the advancement of technology. And you're stronger on the international market. The farther ahead you are with technology, the stronger you are on the international market, which means the capitalist system is working right, and it means there's more wealth in the country. So it's doing all those things. It's contrary to all those things. So if you want to, there's several people you need to talk to. Figure right out that Susan Collins of Maine supported net neutrality. I think there's several other Republicans that could be contacted. I don't know if it's too late or not. I don't know dates at all, or whether it's too late to talk about net neutrality, but John McCain is the one that put the McCain-Feingold law through, that put caps on campaign money. So he's a real strong proponent of campaign finance reform. And so I'll report to him that if the Chink is on there talking about the Tesla and why you can't buy it anywhere, which would be contrary to the campaign finance corruption, which causes the Tesla not to be sold anywhere. And if John McCain supports campaign finance reform and Chink is helping him, that it would be wise of him to support net neutrality, to support Chink and everybody else. And you should, write to him and tell him all that. And I'm hoping he'd understand all that. It makes sense to me. The other one to contact, Lindsey Graham, seems to be pretty liberal. He supports open borders, and I don't think he supports it because of the corporates. I kind of think he just supports open borders the same, because we know Bernie Sanders supports open borders, and he isn't doing it just for corporate America either. Probably not. He just thinks it's generous to let people come in. And I think Lindsey Graham, which means Lindsey Graham's fairly liberal, the way Sanders is. Sanders leans towards liberalism, but anyway, I think Lindsey Graham would be open-minded to supporting net neutrality. Another one, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, he was the head of the Tea Party movement, I think, and their main platform was corporate welfare, stopping it. Well, you notice Trump has been trying to stop corporate welfare, but you need a free internet, and you need to be able to talk about what's wrong with corporate welfare. And in order to push Ted Cruz's movement, and he might be open-minded into net neutrality too, I don't know. I'm thinking he might be. Corporate welfare, a good example of corporate welfare is where you have the Green Bay Packers. I heard this with Dennis Prager. He's a Jewish guy that writes. He was on Tom Snyder. He writes editorials. He's all over the country. And he was talking about how that the football teams, Jesse Ventura talking about it too, how we used to be able to buy stock in them. Well, anyway, all of a sudden the NFL owners shut it down. You can't do that anymore. They shut them out. Well, they take a whole bunch of taxpayer money, and then they build their athletic stadiums, and then they treat it like private property. Well, if one penny of taxpayer money goes into a stadium, it's public property, but they treat it like private property. Basically, they stole it from the taxpayer. Well, Trump I've noticed, he has been putting a stop to some of their corporate welfare they're getting. In other words, that taxpayer money, that's corporate welfare. Trump's been stopping it. I think that's why they're not stopping these football players from kneeling at the national anthem. It's the corporate owners that won't shut them up because they're thumbing their nose at Trump because he's stopping their corruption and their corporate welfare, and they're not liking it. I don't know, but this is a question that needs to be answered by Fox News, and I never hear it on Fox News. Fox News doesn't tell you everything. So anyway, therefore, Ted Cruz, I think, and if we're talking about it right now, Ted Cruz needs to keep, net neutrality. Okay, so the Trump impeachment problem, I want to talk about that. I don't think it's fair. The investigation against him, I don't think it's fair. I think it's put there. We know that this FBI person that talked to this girlfriend, or one of the other ones stated, that Trump was as bad as Sanders. Well, what does that tell me? That he's a swamper that wants to swamp. He's protecting the swamp. Well, it looks that way because Trump and Sanders are two swamp drainers. It could be, he just supported Hillary, and those were Hillary's two major opponents too. But by stating that Trump is almost as bad as Sanders, when we know Sanders is real aggressive against campaign finance corruption in the swamp, and Trump was almost as aggressive, that sounds like a swamper protecting the swamp. Okay. Well, he's an anti-populist and wants to knock off Trump for that reason. And if there's probably more than just this one person in the FBI, how do we know Mueller isn't the same thing? If Mueller was interested in the spirit of the independent counsel law, wouldn't he just dismiss this whole case because it's not a high crime or a misdemeanor, collusion is not illegal, there's no probable cause, and there's no smoking gun. So he's not interested in the spirit of the independent counsel law, he's more interested in the letter of the independent counsel law that leads a reasonable person to believe that he has a conflict of interest, an axe to grind, an ulterior motive, or a bias, a partiality, a bias, or a hidden agenda for knocking Trump off. Any reasonable person might wonder, by this fact, the prosecutors are going to say that by firing Comey, Trump had the intent to obstruct justice or impede a federal investigation. We'll prove intent by the fact that he got Mueller. Lost. He attempted to get Mueller fired too. That's how they're proving intent. Trump needs to make sure his statements that he didn't request legal advice from his aide on whether or not to fire Mueller are consistent with everyone else's who were there at the time they claim this happened. Otherwise, they could probably get him for perjury, or if he talks to Mueller, make sure it's not under oath. In defense of Trump, a collusion is not a crime and not an impeachable offense, therefore there's no obstruction of justice. There may have been, impeding a federal investigation. You could make that, but you couldn't say obstruction of justice because there was no crime, everything was just. Okay, Trump has a reason to believe that an FBI employee stated that Trump is almost as bad. Oh, I did that one. If he had the... Okay, that's part of it. Stated that Trump is almost as bad as Sanders. And that he had the intent to protect corruption. And that, to protect the swamp. And that others in the FBI had the same intent. Comey included in that. That in itself is a good reason to fire Comey, because it protects democracy. It protects our one man, one vote, and the right of the people to elect Trump. And if someone's just trying to knock him off just because they want the swamp protected, and that's the reason they have the investigation, that's not democracy, and that's not justice. So to protect democracy, he'd have the reason to fire Comey. And he'd also assume that if Comey got fired, someone else would take it over. Okay. That involves the rights of one man, one vote, the populace who put him in office and would have reason to fire Mueller too, in that he didn't seem to be interested in the spirit of the independent counsel law and has a reasonable suspicion that he had an axe to grind, ulterior motive, hidden agenda, or conflict of interest, and could have someone else put in his place. Okay, well, I mean, if there's someone else put it in place, they didn't obstruct justice anyway, because someone else just took it over. So how do you obstruct justice? And he believes there's something wrong, a good reasonable suspicion that there's something wrong with Mueller, that he's biased or partial, he had political bias, partisan, whatever. He'd have a reason to get rid of him. It's just, this is the way Trump ought to argue it, and they don't. And then nobody does on Fox either. That's what bugs me. I mean, you could come in there and you could say, it's like when you go to calculus class, right? You're a black guy, and you walk in, and there's a big rumor that, the calculus professor is prejudiced. And I've seen some that were. We even had one. I heard him talking. Well, that's too good of a grade for Pius to get. How'd he get that? He's from Africa. You know, and so I know, you know, you knew that I knew there was bias with college professors. Well, anyway, there's a board that investigates stuff like that. Well, if you walk in, if you're a black guy, you walk into calculus and you want to get a fair grade, and then you find out you have the right to go through Dauphin Ed and get another professor. One you think's fair, like Buren Thomas. He was one of our professors. I mean, he was fair, wasn't prejudiced. He did everything down to the wire, as fair as they can be. And my point is, and I mean, you had to be smart to get through it. But you knew that if you flunked, you deserved to flunk. You knew it wasn't due to racism, or, you know, you thought you were too smart or too much of a show off or whatever, jealous of you. You knew there was no conflicts of interest with the person. And it's the same thing with Trump. Why doesn't he have that same right to be treated fairly and get a person in there that is fair? And that's, no one seems to have made that point. Okay, and the other thing about the DACA bill, there's something I think the public needs to know. The public should know, when Nancy Pelosi says that she won't support the DACA bill because he's trying to make America white again, and because it's a ransom when he puts the DACA on there to get the wall through, it's a ransom for the DACA people. How do we know that Nancy Pelosi isn't dependent on campaign money from Dole Pineapple or some other corporation that wants open borders? How much money is she getting from these? And if this has not been made public, it should be. And is she pandering to campaign money donors in corporate America and to pad the wallet of the corporates to the detriment of everyone else? That should be brought out. I think that's exactly what's happening with Nancy Pelosi. Okay, why does Dianne Feinstein want a clean DACA bill? And what Trump need to ask her, when she asked Trump, they had that big meeting, you know, the big table, and it had, you know, and the two major guys were out of there. McConnell wasn't there, and I don't know who the other one is. I can't remember their names. You know, the Senate Majority Leader, the Minority Leaders, and all that. Schumer wasn't there either. They had a big meeting, and Dianne Feinstein said, could I have a clean DACA bill? Why didn't Trump tell her right then, you have to use the DACA bill as a bargaining piece, because otherwise you don't have democracy. In other words, the public's one man, one vote depends on using that DACA bill to get the wall through. Especially when you have 87% support for the wall, or something, a reduction of immigration. You had that. And so much for the DACA bill, but on both sides it was a majority. And if you have campaign money involved, and Dianne Feinstein is taking a bunch of campaign money from corporates that want that border left open, then you don't have democracy unless you have that DACA bill connected with that wall, the border wall, and stopping the chain migration. You don't have democracy otherwise, and that's why Trump should have told her right then and there and asked her to reveal how much money she's getting from these corporations that want the borders open, and why she's not taking $27 a piece the way Sanders is. Trump should have asked her right then and there. I don't know why he didn't. That's what he should have asked her. And what's the other thing? Robert Sovereignty, I can't remember. Mine is blank. Told Dianne Feinstein this is the House meeting to have this. Yeah, two is one bill. It's okay, especially when campaign finance money is part of the problem. It's part of the process. Seems to be that's the other thing. Seems to be a movement by both parties. I've noticed. When they talk about the base Democrats, these are the people in bed with campaign money, in bed with corporations that want the border open. Though that when they talk about those hard left Democrats, and I notice there's a bunch of Republicans too, and I wonder if those corporations are not giving campaign money to both parties and trying to get these two bills debated separately. But what's going to happen if they are? That means Trump will veto the DACA bill. That won't get through, and he won't get his wall. So who's the big losers there? Well, they 65% of the 55% that want limited immigration and the chain migration to stop, and the 85% that want the DACA bill, the Democrats that want the DACA bill, the Republicans that want Trump's wall and Trump, and who's the big winner? Corporate America. That's what I wonder, if someone needs to be watching that. That needs to be made public. If there's lobbying trying to separate those two, so they're debated separately, and there was, a report that there was. Okay, and this is all should have been public. Fox News doesn't bring it out. I haven't heard CNN. Of course they don't. Corporate owned. They don't say crap. Even the popular Steve Hilton tonight. What, the Nix Revolution. He didn't bring it out either. Newt Gingrich didn't know crap. He's usually pretty smart, and I thought he was terrible. But I usually like Fox News. But it sure went down the toilet tonight. But anyway, that's this report, and hopefully that, some of this all might just be, hot gas. I don't know, but this is stuff that concerns me anyway, that I worry about. And if everybody watches everything, even if it's just paranoia half the time, we probably get a lot more done to stop corruption. Anyway, thanks for watching.